Then on Sports Central, we go over a college football game preview and prediction on the unexpected big matchup coming up here in Week 6 of this 2022 college football season. And it's going to be over the TCU Horned Frogs and the Kansas Jayhawks. Huge matchup for both these teams coming up here in Week 6. Both teams are undefeated right now. Kansas is 5-0, TCU is 4-0. Both teams are ranked in the top 20. We would have expected this in the offseason, seeing both these teams undefeated heading into Week 6. I mean, Kansas and TCU are expected to be two of the bottom 3 teams in the Big 12 by almost everybody this offseason. But it turns out, heading into the middle parts of this season, both teams are undefeated and two of the top teams in the Big 12. So definitely a very intriguing matchup and a crucial one for both these teams coming up here in Week 6. We'll be going over a full game preview and prediction on this matchup here today, starting out with your team trends. TCU took care of Oklahoma last week, 55-24 was the final score there. They're 4-0, and I mean that's the first really significant win for TCU. They're going up against a ranked opponent there in Oklahoma. And I mean, by the way, OU was just a top 10 team literally 2 weeks ago, and suddenly OU is out of the rankings after 2 straight disappointing losses. They lost to K-State in Week 4, lost to TCU by over 30. They lost by 31 to TCU this past weekend, which is obviously you got to be super impressed with TCU. Just the way they came out and dominated from the start was extremely impressive, and that's why TCU has jumped all the way up to 17 in this week's rankings. I don't even think they had any votes in the week 5 rankings. So for TCU to jump like that, it really goes to show. I mean, TCU is a team that's very improved, and they've been impressive so far this season. But if you look at Kansas here, they beat Iowa State 14-11, a lower scoring matchup that really wasn't expected to be that way. I mean, Kansas offensively has been really strong so far this season. If you look at their first games, or their games before the Iowa State matchup. So for Kansas to win the game with 14 points is impressive, and that goes to show that their defense definitely shows some potential as well. Nonetheless, yeah, Kansas 5-0, TCU is 4-0. Kansas is ranked 19th. First time Kansas has been ranked in the AP poll since 2009. I mean, it's been a very long time since Kansas has been a relevant team in college football. I mean, if you look at their history, they've been probably the worst team by a decent margin in the Power 5 in the past decade or so. I mean, this team hasn't even gotten above 3 wins. I mean, they got 3 wins in 2019. Last time they got 3 wins before that plus was 2014. And I mean, they haven't gotten 4 wins since 2009 when they went 5-7. So I mean, this Kansas team has already matched that win total. They're at 5-0 right now. I mean, it's pretty incredible what Kansas is doing here, especially considering they've been just such a poor football team in the past decade. And I think they're starting to place themselves as the surprise team of the 2022 season. It used to be on Saturday, October 8th in Lawrence, Kansas. So Kansas is the home team for this one, and College Game Day is even in Lawrence this week, which is pretty awesome for Kansas fans and this football team program in general. It's pretty awesome to see that. And your kickoff is 11 a.m. Central. Spread's going TCU by 6, and that could change over the course of the week. That's just an opening spread. Over under 67.5, so higher scoring game can be expected here. And your FPI is going TCU 68%. So TCU is favored by a decent amount in this game, which is a little bit surprising considering Kansas has been really good so far this season. But then again, TCU is coming off of a huge win over Oklahoma by 31, so it makes sense. So his history, TCU leads at 25-9. They've won 3 straight against the Jayhawks, and they've won 9 out of the past 10. Here's your stat comparison for this one. TCU is 5th in points per game so far this season. That is something to keep in mind. They're averaging 48 points per game so far this year, which is very impressive. They're 47th in points allowed, 60th in pass yards a game, 2nd in rush yards a game. So this is a team that has been outstanding in the backfield this season. Their lead rusher is Kendre Miller with nearly 400 yards and 5 touchdowns so far this season. And for yards allowed, 90th in passing, 47th in rushing. As for Kansas, 17th in points per game, 60th in points allowed. So once again, as I mentioned before, Kansas has been a pretty strong team on offense so far this season. So for them to hold Iowa State to 11 this past weekend was obviously huge, considering offensively it was tough for them to get anything going. But they are 96th in pass yards a game. This is mainly a rushing offense, being 21st in rush yards a game. And for yards allowed, 124th in passing. So this pass defense has allowed a lot of yards so far this season, and 43rd in rush yards allowed. So Passing defense, the secondary has allowed 270 yards per game. Something to keep in mind there, as that could be a way that TCU has an advantage. But then again, TCU is also more of a rushing offense, so there's not a terrible concern there. Your recent matchups: TCU beat Oklahoma 55-24, beat SMU the week before 42-34, had a bye week, and then before that they beat Tarleton State 59-17 and beat Colorado in week 1 38-13. As for Kansas, beat Iowa State 14-11, beat Duke 35-27. They beat Houston on the road 48-30, beat West Virginia on the road 55-42, and beat Tennessee Tech 56-10. So, Kansas has played a few good teams. West Virginia, that's a Big 12 opponent on the road that they beat. Houston had very high expectations going into the season, beat them on the road. Duke was undefeated going into that matchup. They beat them. Iowa State, not a terrible team. So Kansas has played a few decent football teams, and this is probably the best team they've played to this point. But Kansas is a team that I think is for real. They've got for real talent. This is not a fluke that they're 5-0. Your key points: TCU, Max Duggan was outstanding against Oklahoma, no doubt. And if you look at Max Duggan a couple of years ago, he was probably the worst quarterback in the Power 5, quite honestly. He was not a good player, but he has improved so much. If you watched him against Oklahoma, you can just see how far he's come. He hasn't thrown an interception to this point in the season yet. He's thrown for 1,000 yards, 11 touchdowns. It's been a great season so far for Max Duggan, who once again has improved drastically over the past couple of years. They're very strong in offense, the rushing game especially. Once again, as I mentioned, they're one of the top rushing teams in the country. And this is a game to really prove that TCU is for real. They're ranked 17th. They got their big win over Oklahoma. With a win here, TCU could suddenly be in the top 15, top 14 or 13 even. So, TCU is a team to potentially keep an eye on. The Big 12 is wide open, so any team can win that Big 12, especially considering Oklahoma is 0-2 in conference. Texas is taking a loss. Baylor's taking a loss. Oklahoma State is still up there, but the Big 12 is wide open right now, that's for sure. As for Kansas, it's starting to look a lot like 2007. If you remember 2007, Kansas was one of the big stories of the season. Just an incredible college football season. And Kansas was, I think they made it to the Orange Bowl. They won that. They were 12-1. Just an outstanding season. And Kansas, this is a team that at 5-0, this team has been very impressive to this point. Of course, their coach at the time, Mark Mangino, there's a little bit of controversy behind him, but their coach right now, Lance Leipold, it is incredible what he has done with Kansas. And he is an outstanding coach to say the least, and hopefully for Kansas they can keep him, because there are a few positions that are opening up across the country. But nonetheless, for this matchup, Jalen Daniels, he's for real. Offense is strong, and this is Kansas's chance. They could be a Big 12 contender. Once again, the conference is wide open. With that said, let's get the prediction here for TCU and Kansas, the unexpected big matchup coming up here in Week 6. And in this matchup, I'm going with Kansas. 34-31 is my predicted final score. This is another tough one. You got two teams that have been very impressive so far this season. TCU really like their momentum heading into this matchup, coming off of an outstanding win over Oklahoma. But Kansas has found a way in their game so far this season. They're 5-0. This team is not a fluke. They're 5-0, and this team has found ways to win close games, beat West Virginia in overtime. They found a way against Houston, found a way against Duke, found a way against Iowa State. Kansas, I think, finds a way in this one too, being at home in this matchup and what has been a sold-out stadium, which is awesome for Kansas. I think Jayhawks get the win here 34-31, even though TCU is going to keep it very close. Probability 55% towards Kansas, over under 67.5. I think that's a pretty high line. I'm going to say the under, I'm going to take the under in this matchup. Obviously, the Iowa State game last week for Kansas was very low scoring, so I do think defense somewhat prevails in this matchup, at least under the 67.5. But I will be taking Kansas to cover the spread as well, which is currently 6 points towards TCU. But that said, let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this game. I got Kansas going to 6-0, but let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I appreciate you guys watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.